Dr. Ingrid Artis is a psychologist. She joins us on the line. Johan Kotzer is a lawyer. And Ricky Fransman, Executive Director of Childline in the Western Cape, is our guest on the line. And Michelle Festus, a women's rights coordinator, South Africa. Johan, thanks so much for joining us. You can't help but to get emotional because just in reading the gravitas, the words in itself, the brutality, the merciless way in the way this girl had been killed, have we become desensitized as a nation, you think?
Yes, good evening, viewers. Indeed, yes. Tonight there should be a time that we need to reflect and maybe take some time out, each and every viewer and people we know, and discuss this horrific sequence of events. We have become desensitized. Yes, violence is prevalent across the board, but there's got to be something wrong with the humanity element in us if we are not shocked right to the core of the exceptional brutality and this immense pain this poor girl had to go through and had to endure in this. We know her legs were broken in reverse. The thoughts that go through your mind, was that done before she was deceased? Was that done? And the inference is to stop her from running away, for instance. Just the sheer pain and the scope of that is something, and yet there doesn't seem to be much from a coverage aspect. It doesn't seem to be in a day-to-day aspect.
Ricky Fransman, Executive Director of Childline in the Western Cape. Ricky, thanks so much. And that's the very question we're asking, that why is it the level of brutality is not covered in the news, primarily just to highlight the scourge of contact crimes that is subjected to the most vulnerable, that being children and women? Ricky, can you hear us? Hi, Ricky.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Why do you think that there is such a lack of coverage or interest when it comes to cases, primarily when it comes to impoverished communities?
No, they were testing sound.
All right, we'll come back to you. Johan?
Yes.
The lack of coverage, you were just alluding to that, we consumed and obsessed with everything else, but where it matters the most, where we should have empathy and compassion, particularly to those that essentially have very little prospects because of their living conditions.
Yes, that is so, and it's also the means they have. It must be understood that starting at the grassroots situation in that very community, and there's perhaps something I must allude to, is, and I don't want to use the word ease, because it's certainly not with ease they speak, but it is with a bluntness that they speak. They speak freely, and the family is speaking openly, and it's unfortunately clear from that way of interacting with the cameras that this is not a first for them to experience what is happening in those communities. Where do they turn to? 90% of them can't even afford to get onto a bus to drive anywhere. Where do they go? To their local police station? Who hears them? Who listens to them at the end of the day? And that must be exceptionally frustrating, and I think that is a major influence when it reverts back, and this type of criminality and this behavior, it's just the boundaries are being removed and it kept on being pushed and pushed. And here again we see something which is exceptionally gruesome.
And we can imagine the pressure on NGOs and other supporting organizations when it comes to dealing with matters of child rape and brutality. From Childline Western Cape Executive Director Ricky Fransman is on the line, or rather Dr. Ingrid Artis. I think that's who we had patched on the line. Now, just from a society and a community that is already broken, that have practically nothing else to offer the world, do they even have a shot at getting justice when it comes to the judicial system, and even support from the likes of Childline and other structures?
Okay, is the question directed at myself?
Yes, Ingrid, yes.
Childline?
Yes. Ingrid? I was just saying, as a psychologist, of course, looking at a community that is already on the sidelines or the periphery of the mainstream economy. They don't have access to much resources, and over and above having to now deal with the loss of a child and see brutality like this. What are we doing wrong as a society?
Okay. It's clear that this community is grieving deeply. And I could hear the outrage in the voices of the family members and the community, and it sounds like it's just a cry for you know, the rest of us as South Africans to listen and to hear and to be aware of how deeply embedded the need is to be heard. And so in terms of justice, we don't know. We'll have to see and see what the police is able to uncover and how they put the pieces together in this case. This sounds to me like a lust murder, a sadistic killing, where the genitals have been mutilated, the extreme violence perpetrated here. That's probably, you know, it's power-driven type of behaviors. Normally, rape has to do with power. So I think this community is in a state of shock at the moment. And the police will have to do their work. It's cut out for them. But I do believe that the evidence in terms of the crime scene will probably give them a lot of clues whether or not this is a structured type of killing or an unstructured killing in terms of the positioning of the body, etc. And that could give them a lot of clues and a good idea of the actual perpetrators. And, you know,
to Dr. Artis. We have Ricky Fransman, who's the Executive Director of Childline in the Western Cape. Ricky, thanks for joining us. But just looking at your resources, and I'm sure you stretched to the brim, but how well is it distributed equitably amongst communities?
In terms of our resources, we are really stretched. You know, one of our core services is offering support to victims of sexual crimes, and we actually sit with a waiting list of up to 50 clients at a time because the resources, you know, that we have are so limited. And these are children that are desperately in need of support. And one of the things that we do is also work with the families and the communities. But because the need is so great, we are not able to reach families and communities as quickly as possible.
And when were you aware of this case, and what kind of support, if at all, were you able to extend to this family?
We became aware of the case in the media. We don't have an office in the Valhalla Park region, but we certainly offer services there, you know, through our prevention and early intervention programs. And so we haven't actually been in contact with the family. But one of the things that we would definitely recommend is that the family gets the emotional support, you know, that they need to work through this terrible trauma that they are going through at the moment.
And I mean, for me, it cuts close because many years ago there was a distant relative who was involved in something similar, not to as graphic and as brutal and merciless. Nonetheless, you know, that it seems that it's become a norm, especially in impoverished communities. If you grew up in the townships, the sound of a gun or a screaming woman at 2 o'clock would be common cause. And that's how this community seems to be just immersed in that kind of frustration. I mean, Johan.
Yes, that's very true. There was a time, and there still is applicable, where glass breaks 2 o'clock in the morning, or a gunshot goes off, where there will be a wealth of phone calls going in certain areas, no doubt in our country, in certain suburbs, and there will be a response, no doubt, to that immediately. But it's as if some of these communities are sequestered in their own cycle and in their own circle. And at the end of the day, they are not perhaps so influential when it comes to you know, to business or anything like that. It is commendable that we have the NGOs, we have all the rights groups involved, and we can analyze till we, you know, all the aspects. Why does it relate? We know when it comes to sexual crimes, and specifically rape, that a high percentage, a very high percentage, committed by those that you do know. That normally would be the first point of departure. But that doesn't change the fact that it's happening with impunity, and it's happening simply because you can get away with it. We can add all the other nuances of it's a power thing, it has all of these implications. at some time, it simply is not. This, and the indication, and I will venture a view, is simply one of the local, the boyfriend, who simply just reacted, 10-1 being rejected by the girlfriend, went there with his friends and did what they did, being 10-1 a local involved in gang activity, criminal activity. I will go as far as further to say this is certainly not the first time that they've gone ahead and committed, in all probability, violent crime.
Dr. Archers, just a disproportionate reaction or response, rather, in the reaction from the community, that people are aware of it, but because they live in such intense fear that they'd rather remain anonymous and not get involved, and this is how this crime is perpetuated. Is there, especially in impoverished areas, what kind of recourse, what kind of assistance, where do even people go if the police or some of police men are suspected of being peddlers of this particular crime?
Okay, so where do communities go? Where do they go for assistance? You know, I think we are certainly lacking in South Africa in terms of easily accessible counselling facilities that's you know, that's available, it's accessible, and it's affordable. So I'm not sure of the resources in Cape Town region, but we certainly don't have enough resources in terms of people getting the assistance that they need from a psychological point of view. This community, I think they, you know, as you can hear from the voices of the community members, the grief here is very strong, but the anger is certainly rising. And I suppose Lekita is a symbol of the destruction and the devastation that's happening in the community, and I think that is really probably part of why the community is probably using it in a way to have a voice.
Ricky, are you surprised by the lack of coverage, or to the extent that this case deserves, and so many others, in highlighting the plight of women when it comes to sexual violence? If you compare it to the New Delhi case where a young girl on a bus was gang raped and thrown off the bus, there was a whole world uproar of comments and reaction to take up or do something in order to deal with this scourge. Do you think that as South Africans we had failed in that regard to just bring this matter to the fore that it deserves? Ricky, can you hear me? All right, we're going to have to let go of Ricky. We're having some technical glitches. But, Johan, I think what we're trying to do is to just try and assist communities as much as possible, particularly in this case, and bring out the ugly truth to those of us that are privileged and are living in a comfortable suburbia, that there is a level of responsibility on all of us, be it to enforce for harsher penalties. And I mean, what penalty is even enough to deal with this matter?
Yes, I don't want to venture in except for to say what is the harshest, and I don't want to get involved in a debate about the death penalty and all of these aspects. We've got our Constitution, but certainly a starting point.
But is the Constitution worth the protection it deserves when it comes to families like the Moors that don't have, I mean, they also have a constitutional right to raise their children and see them fulfill their destinies?
That is correct, and see them to be able to walk out. This particular young lady was going for a karaoke evening. She was not going to some nightclub or whatever, and it's a regular event. It is something which is organized at a local hall which they have in the area, and this is the fate that awaited her in that situation. What is of further concern is that for many hours after that, it doesn't seem to have been any swift response or anything coming from the authorities that say, we have this at hand. And I don't want to make comparisons against the Tokai forest, but I mean, within seconds we knew it was, and of course any death, any hideous crime is one crime too many. and I'm not belittling that at all, but it was within moments we knew there was a Swiss, connections and all of that, and, the press, everybody reacted, and this was sort of dealt with. This is bad for business sort of issue. Any life lost in these circumstances has got to be bad in that instance. But our concern here still is that everybody will fathom the outcry, everybody will be upset. But unless the ordinary citizen in South Africa doesn't stand up and come to the rescue of some of these communities facing these issues and start flexing their muscle and their capabilities, which they do have, to step in and highlight it, we're going to have difficulties.
Absolutely. Praveen, hello to you. Thanks for your patience. And what's your comment or question?
Hi, good evening, Cindy.
Hi.
Cindy, my view is that the Constitution is very, very ineffective when it comes to protecting, vulnerable groups and the innocent, law-abiding citizens of South Africa. Serious and violent crime is on the increase, and it has to stop somewhere. The perpetrators of these kind of crimes, they are arrested, they have all kinds of constitutional rights, and this cannot be done to them, that cannot be done to them. They go into jail and they get 3 meals a day, they get medical treatment, and the real victims, the real sufferers are the victims of crime. Can you imagine the family of that girl today? She was so brutally raped, and and so brutally murdered. This is one crime too many, and we have many crimes like this. And I think it's time that the government stood up and took action against these kind of people. The law in the country doesn't have much teeth, and that is why you find that the incidents of vigilantism are also on the increase. When the communities get all of criminals like this, they want to finish them off, and we can't really blame them.
Praveen, thanks so much. I mean, the social psyche, of course, and some will even shy away from this level of brutality because we just want to block it out. But that's not going to deal or eradicate this matter. And Dr. Arches, just from a psychological point of view, in getting assistance, I mean, you just have to see how distraught this family is and whether they even feel they have a shot at life, considering that their angel and what the father calls his star has now, her life has been snuffed out in this manner.
Yeah, I have such compassion for this family. They'll have to go through a grieving process, obviously, and it's going to take most likely quite a long time. They'll have to typically go through the shock, the denial, the anger, the sadness, and then eventually the acceptance. And the acceptance may not come quickly because of the absolute brutality and sadistic nature of this murder. But for them to heal and move on, they'll have to be willing to grieve and go through all the difficult processes involved in grieving.
Dr. Ingrid Arches, a psychologist, thanks so much for your time. We have a caller, Lekita in Pretoria. Hello to you.
Hello, Mama. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Cindy, I'm looking at this kind of a confusion that I'm looking at the moment. And then, when people are doing such a thing like this, you ask yourself as a parent, as a human, and then you say, where is our government? What our government is doing about such a thing like this? Because such a people, for human, they belong to be hanged,
Lekita, that's a conversation maybe that we ought to be having, Johan. I mean, for any parent to have to go through this, but perhaps maybe the system has failed them and that the Constitution needs to be revised with regards to the harshest penalty.
Yes, I'm afraid that we are slowly but surely entering the realm of what we set out to do, and with our wonderful Constitution and the principles in there, that unfortunately it is not showing an effect with this sort of situation. What we must understand here, despite for the horrific death this young victim died, a vast part of the family also died, and friends died. And yes, there is all the stages of grief and all of those aspects, and that's conceded. But the fact is, how do you really and truly go through that final and make your peace with this? I found it a hard notion we cannot continue like this. Something will have to be done.
Something certainly needs to give. Johan Kotze, thank you so much for your time. And of course, you continue the discussion with us. It's at ANN7 TV, #Justice for Lekita.